Hello, and welcome to another video. Today, I will be going through and making updates to 2 more of my EDH decks. So this is another follow-up to my previous video in which I was sorting through a large pile of EDH cards and deciding which decks they would go in. And now I am making the updates to those decks. So I will link to that video from this video's description if you would like to take a look. But otherwise, I will be getting into updating my Damia deck and my Progenitus deck. Alright, I've got both decks right here, and I think I'll start with Damia. And I have my pile of cards to be added here. I put the Armory of Aerois in here, which made a brief appearance in my last EDH video, but I decided not to put it in my cat's equipment deck, so I think I'm gonna try it out in here. We have a few instants and sorceries, an enchantment, and a bunch of creatures. So I don't know if all of these are necessarily going to be making the cut into this deck, but they're at least something that I saw and wanted to think about and kind of weigh against what is already in here. So taking a look at Armory of Aerois, since this deck is based on Proliferate, we need to be able to kickstart +1/+1 counters onto creatures and poison counters onto players. So this is a good way to get that first +1/+1 counter onto a creature and is repeatable. It can get moved around from creature to creature, so I do think it is something I would like to add in if we can. So I have this deck roughly sorted by card type, and I don't think we want to look at replacing any creatures or any land with this. So I'll set those aside. Actually, I think as I'm going through here, since we have so many cards that might need to go into the deck, I'm just gonna pull out anything that I think kind of jumps out at me as one that I might potentially want to replace. And we can kind of look at them all at once. Okay, so here's what I came up with. I pulled out Burgeoning because, although it's strong early in the game, I kind of just feel like I draw this when I really don't need it. And I have other ways that are maybe a bit more effective to ramp in this deck, so I wouldn't be too heartbroken about Burgeoning going away. Tainted Strike is mostly here because it can give a creature infect, but I think with some of the new cards that I found to add to the deck, this one might end up getting outclassed. So I pulled that one aside. Wipe Away I really don't mind, but I could see replacing it for something that serves the theme of the deck a bit better. And same kind of goes for Dissolve. I don't think it's bad, I just think that myself as a player am not very good at using counter magic, and I think maybe just replacing it with something that adds in Poison or Proliferate would just do me a bit better. Yeah, kind of just going toward my style of play. Letting this card go would be okay. Courage in Crisis I think is fine. I am hesitant to get rid of a card that says Proliferate on it, but as a one-time +1/+1 counter card, I'm actually thinking that this might be the one that I want to trade with Armory of Erois, so that we can get more +1/+1 counters out of it. And then we do lose one instance of Proliferate, but we may end up replacing some of these cards with ones that do proliferate. So for that reason, I am willing to make the trade. Grim Affliction is kind of the same situation here. There's a card that I know I've pulled out that might just be a better version of this, so I kind of want to make a comparison and see if this is one that I'm willing to replace. And then Reap and Sow, I really don't mind. I like to cast this one Entwined, but land destruction isn't really my style, and I know it is important to be able to get rid of problematic lands in EDH, but in the context of this deck, feels a little bit mean to me. So I think this is a good starting point. so I'll go ahead and swap out the Courage in Crisis. And then I don't want to look at creatures quite yet, so I'll pull those out. So for Beastmaster Ascension, this is a target for Proliferate, so that we can get up to 7 counters as quickly as possible, and give all of our creatures +5/+5. I think I could just swap this one out with Reap and Sow. So next, Drown in Ichor is the one that I was thinking about replacing Grim Affliction with. And it does also proliferate, so we're not missing out on that ability. The difference really is that Grim Affliction can be built upon by putting more and more -1/-1 counters on a creature over time, whereas Drown in Ichor is just -4/-4 one time, which hopefully can kill the creature. So, more of a quick hit than a slow burn. It is cheaper to cast as well, but it is a sorcery instead of an instant, so that's kind of a downgrade. I think I'll make the swap to see how I like it, but this is one I could see maybe reversing the decision on. And then these 3 cards are essentially ones that just say each opponent gets a poison counter. I think previously Ichor Rats was the only card in here that had that ability, and I was really wanting for more ways to give everyone a poison counter for me to be able to proliferate onto outside of just regular infect damage. Maybe I'll just swap out these for 3 of these. All right. And then last of all, we have our creatures. So Winding Constrictor just gives us an extra counter anytime we're looking to proliferate onto creatures or artifacts. I think I'm gonna set this one aside for now because I like its ability, but it's more narrow than I would prefer, so it's not gonna be a high priority include for me. So I will come back to this if it looks like we're gonna have room. So Volrath the Steel Shaper puts -1/-1 counters onto creatures, and then it can become a copy of any creature with a counter on it, but maintains its own power and toughness of 7/5. So that's an interesting ability and something that I wouldn't mind experimenting with. I'm gonna look through the creatures now, and like before, I will pull aside the ones that I think I wouldn't mind parting with. So Vorel of the Hullclade can basically double counters on a permanent, which I think is pretty strong, but he is kind of slow. He only targets one thing at a time, and he's just a 1/4 creature, so I think it's good, but I would be open to potentially replacing it. And Thrumming Bird I like, but even as a flyer, it's kind of hard to get through as just a 1/1, and even if it can get through early in the game, there just might not be a lot of proliferate targets available to it, or at least not ones that are going to have a great impact. I think I would maybe want to look at something that could proliferate a little bit better than this one. Shapers of Nature. Initially I put in here to kickstart +1/+1 counters onto my creatures, and also for that card draw ability, but ultimately I think it's just too slow and too expensive. Spikeweaver is the same basic thing. I just want to be able to put +1/+1 counters on my creatures so that I can proliferate onto them. I might not cut this one unless there's something pretty compelling. Boneyard Lurker is just a utility creature, but I've really never found that I'm happy with it. Every time I have it in hand, I kind of just don't want it, so this one I would really love to replace. And that's it. So I think maybe I'll just cut out Boneyard Lurker right away, and we'll get Volrath in here. Alright. Deep Glow Skate doubles counters on any permanent, so maybe that would be a good replacement for Vorel, and instead of doing permanents one at a time like Vorel does, we could just do everything all at once with Deep Glow Skate. So maybe I'll try that out. Vorinclex is one that I would really love to get into this deck. it essentially doubles the counters that I can put on things and halves the counters that my opponents put on things. So I would like to do that. So I'm gonna replace Wipe Away with this, I think. I know it's a pretty significant increase in mana cost, and that's something that we really haven't talked about in this video, but I may need to do some reevaluation of the land and my number of color sources after making such significant changes to the deck, just to make sure everything is balanced the way I need it to be. Next up we have Ezuri, Claw of Progress. He basically will collect experience counters and then distribute +1/+1 counters onto my other creatures each combat. My concern with this though is that I don't have enough creatures with power 2 or less for this to be useful. So I'm gonna take a look through the creatures as they are now and see what that looks like. We do have a 1/1 Thrumming Bird down here. Not a lot, really. I think I'm gonna be taking a pass on Ezuri. We have Forgotten Ancient, which will just sit back and accumulate +1/+1 counters whenever anyone casts a spell, and he can distribute them for free at the beginning of upkeep. So I think this would actually be a great replacement for Shapers of Nature. We do lose out on the ability to trade +1/+1 counters for card draw, but I think distributing the counters for free is pretty worth it. So I'll go ahead and make that trade. And then Scheming Aspirant drains life from our opponents every time we proliferate. So maybe I'll look to Thrumming Bird for that. And then I guess the question becomes whether we want a Spike Weaver or a Winding Constrictor. And I think I would like to stay with the Spike Weaver here. It's a great target for Proliferate and can continue to dole out those +1/+1 counters to our creatures, and also offers some protection to our creatures with that little fog ability. So, I don't know. Not a bad guy to keep around, I don't think. So that takes care of the Damia deck. And next we have Progenitus. Alright. So again, we have quite a bit to think about. We have a bunch of Hydras to potentially add in. and then some other random things. I think the Heartbeat of Spring is actually just a cosmetic change, so I can easily take care of that one. Oh no, it's not. Oh, now I feel dumb. I thought for sure I had one in here, but I guess not. Well, I guess we'll see if I have room then. Although, we do have Greater Good right here. And I know top of mind, that's one that I've kind of been wanting to get rid of. I just find that I almost never want it. It is kind of nice to have as that escape hatch if one of my creatures is going to be dying anyway, to sacrifice it to this and draw some cards, but it's really just not doing it for me. So I really would not be sad to get rid of it. So maybe Heartbeat of Spring can just jump right in. Maybe I was thinking of the Dictate of Karametra or something. Maybe I even had one in here before, but I took it out. But that would be weird. Anyway, Kodama I will put up with the Hydras, so we can do all of the creatures at once. So, Broker's Ascendancy is something that I've definitely had my eye on. It makes me feel better about potentially casting Hydras a bit smaller than I would like to start, and allowing them to grow over time. So I've pulled out a couple things here. True Conviction is another one, kind of like Greater Good, where I do acknowledge that its ability is good and powerful, but I almost never want it when I draw it. So I think this is one that I would just like to get rid of. Savage Summoning. It's mostly just paying green for the ability to flash in a creature and make it unable to be countered. So I'm not saying it's bad by any means, but maybe something that I wouldn't mind changing up. And then Abzan Charm, I kind of just pulled out because I was thinking about that distribution of +1/+1 counters. Although I think I mostly use this for its first ability, where you exile a creature power 3 or greater. So, I don't know. I think I'm just gonna start by taking out True Conviction. And then Jeweled Lotus. There's really not a lot here that I would want to get rid of. I wish I could just replace a land, but I don't think that's a good idea. Maybe just swapping out Savage Summoning. And then Ajani Sleeper Agent. In this deck, I think would just draw cards and put +1/+1 counters on things. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad to make the swap with Abzan Charm for this one, since it kind of covers those two abilities. It would just mean shaving a removal spell. But I kind of wonder if Ajani's +1 would be worth it though. I think I will try it and see if I like it, but if I really find that I'm missing the Abzan Charm, then I might put it back. Alright, and then lastly we have 5 Hydras and a Spirit. So Kadama of the West Tree gives modified creatures trample, and the idea is almost all creatures in this deck should be modified since they're Hydras. And then as a nice bonus does a little bit of ramping. I'm actually wondering if maybe Brawn would be an okay trade here. They both lend trample to creatures, although Bronze is going to be more lasting because it wants to be dead to be able to give trample, whereas if Kodama of the West Tree dies, then the trample gets removed. But there are several ways in this deck to give creatures trample, so I think this is a trade that I would be comfortable making. And then we have Zaxara the Exemplary, which produces mana and creates creature tokens for us, which is pretty cool. So the first one I pulled out was Nessian Wild's Ravager. I don't really want to get rid of any Hydras, but seems like it's gonna have to be necessary if I want to make any changes here. It is potentially a 12/12 for 6, or a 6/6 that fights a creature. It is the rare Hydra that has an actual power and toughness, so it doesn't just die if you remove all of its +1/+1 counters. But it's also maybe not the most exciting Hydra, so I think maybe I could make a swap here for Zaxara and not feel too bad about it. We have Shivan Devastator. It just has flying and haste. Again, it's not the most exciting Hydra, and there are a couple ways in the deck to give all creatures haste or flying, so it's not really going to be unique in those abilities. So I think I'll take a pass on this one. Wildwood Scourge. I don't know why this is in here. There are definitely non-Hydra creatures in the deck, so the opportunity to have creatures with +1/+1 counters that are not Hydras does exist, especially with that Broker's Ascendancy that we just put in. But I think the use case is pretty narrow, so I'll be taking a pass on this one as well. Oh, well, this is what I get for just looking at the art. Alright. This is not a Hydra. It is an instant. I don't really know if there's anything in here that I would want to replace with this. I keep thinking about Worldly Tutor. I don't really like the way that it doesn't go into your hand, but I don't think I want to replace a tutor. And yeah, all it does is put +1/+1 counters on. It doesn't fight or anything. So yeah, I don't know that I'm sold on this one. I think I'll pass again. That art is pretty sweet though. And then our last one is Polukranos Reborn. It is a 4/5 that can transform. It becomes a 6/6 with reach and lifelink, and is basically the Wormcoil engine of Hydras. So I would like to get this one in here if we can. I don't know. I don't really want to get rid of any of my Hydras. Maybe the Colney Hydra. It can end up being a pretty cheap 8/8, but all it does is have trample, so I guess it's not a very flashy Hydra. So maybe that's an okay swap to make. And that'll do it. So I will put my decks away, and I'll need to file away the cards that got pulled out. And there we have it. Thank you so much for being here today while I updated 2 of my EDH decks. I really appreciate you being here. Go ahead and leave a comment and let me know what you think about the changes that I made. Would you have done anything differently? Do you have any decks that share a commander or theme with me? I would be curious to know about that and how you approach the deck. And of course, please make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. I very much appreciate your support, and I put out new Magic the Gathering ASMR videos every Monday and Friday. But that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day.